My dad, Francis Edward Nelson, or Frankie, as I would call him if he had done something like leave a spoon lying on the counter after stirring his coffee. I would teasingly tell him he was going to be in trouble with the Pope because he was Catholic, like when your parents call you by your first, middle, and last names when you're seconds away from being grounded. My dad envisioned himself to be a writer like Henry David Thoreau, and wanted to retire and live in a cabin on a lake. To write and pour out the depths of his soul, and his soul was deep. He longed simply to be loved for no reason other than being himself. My brother said something the other day that struck me. He said he loved everyone unconditionally, except for sometimes himself. He always kind of felt like he didn't quite measure up. He didn't choose the college major or the career path that his father wanted for him, and he felt like he had disappointed his father. And he didn't succeed in his first marriage, and he was Catholic, so that took its toll. He didn't end up with the traditional family that he had envisioned, marriage and fatherhood through having babies. Instead, he stepped right into being the immediate father to 3 somewhat unruly teenagers, as at that time we were all in some sort of existential process of finding ourselves. But he stepped into his version of fatherhood bravely and with an open mind, and more importantly, an open heart. His heart knew no bounds and had no walls. He was always giving, loving, and sharing, and gave openly and freely, and did so whether or not he received anything in return. I will miss seeing his eyes twinkle when he smiled, and the corners of his mouth move upwards with an innocent mischievousness when he was telling stories, and his right eyebrow raised when he had begun telling a tall tale, which almost was always on the subject of fishing. I will miss him grabbing a hold of my hand at a poignant and meaningful moment, so that I would slow down, stop, and seize the deepness and fullness and feelings of that moment. He was a very sensitive man, which was often difficult for a man of his age, as he grew up in a generation where expectations were set for men to be the providers and bring home the bacon. They got good jobs after going to college and chose degrees that made the most money to provide for their families. Whether it was what they wanted or not, they were supposed to do what was expected of them. Men of his generation were not ruled by their emotions. My dad did not do the things that were expected of him. He chose psychology and liked it. He enjoyed cooking, but not the cleaning so much. And he was very emotional and could not stop himself from being so. He was deep and sensitive and had feelings, and he wanted to talk about them. He did not want to suppress them and assume a role he knew he wasn't a good fit for. So because talking about one's feelings as a man wasn't big back then, he learned to pour out his emotional conflicts and unspoken words in his poetry, and he somehow also managed to keep a sense of humor about life. His laughter was infectious and drew in everyone around him, even when the subject matter may have been less than appropriate. You see, he did not know any boundaries, and he always laughed and joked and told stories like a kid at heart, no matter what social situation he was in. He always had big dreams and high hopes and a kind word and greeting to give everyone he saw throughout his day. Even if he told you the same story or the same joke over and over again, to him it was still just as fresh and funny as the first time he told it, making this experience just the same for you. He was smart as a whip, especially with math and politics. He had no real sense of direction and was forever telling me we were going south when I knew we were going north. He was a semi-terrible driver, and he bobbed and weaved all over the road. But he loved to drive, and he never got too turned around that he couldn't find his way back home. He loved hot dogs, clams, cheese pizza, Triscuits, Diet Coke, rum, unfortunately, eggnogs, frozen orange juice, the kind you add water to, coffee, even microwave reheated coffee, pork chops, a bit of ice cream now and again, the Chinese gourmet, and a great deal. If he got a great deal on something, he absolutely had to have it, no matter what it was, no matter if he even needed it. You see, that was because of his soaringly generous spirit. He would almost always inadvertently run into someone who could use whatever he had extras of, and he just gave it to them. He always wanted children and to be a father. That dream didn't turn out quite the way he had envisioned it, but he did end up experiencing the joys and heartaches of being a father. He was there for me for every major event in my life. The suicide walk after my cousin died, and to honor a close high school friend we'd lost to suicide. We trained for the walk to prevent suicide together. He even took his turn on the treadmill, and he bought tennis shoes instead of his usual boat shoes. He was there for my college graduation, graduation from the police academy, and graduation from law school. He was there for my first used car purchase and for my first brand new car purchase. He helped me repair my first used car, which we had picked out together. Now that's a story. You see, his dad, Grandpa Bob, was handy with tools and woodworking. My dad, not so much, but he was always willing to try. Not knowing that he really didn't know much about cars, I agreed to let him help me change the thermostat. He put some of the blue boat cushions on the garage floor for me to lay down on under the car. And I went, he put some of the blue boat cushions on the garage floor for me to lay down on, and under the car I went. He dropped down some tools from above. Neither of us saw any danger in that. I have no idea why, but as I was writing this, that's exactly how it happened. He said, here's a wrench. Here's a socket set. But he forgot, or maybe he really didn't know, that if I unscrewed the plug to the thermostat, I would get a face full of antifreeze. Which I did. And which made both of us laugh, but we did finish the repair job. He attended every funeral with me as my close friends and family passed away. My grandma, my dear friend Jose, Katie, my niece Chelsea, his dad, his stepmom Alice, and my other dad. He was there and supported me through each and every one. He shopped and cooked for me when I was sick. He made his famous omelets and scrambled eggs after I had my tonsils removed. He tried to get me to eat what he called his famous stack-ups, but those were made from some kind of meat I could never quite seem to chew. I don't know what it is still to this day, but he always got it on sale because it was a deal. He went to all my game nights with all my friends when I moved away and then came back home to visit. He played all the board games with us and goofed around and laughed just as much as we did. I never left him behind. He was included in everything that I did. We took vacations together and went rock hounding to the beach and to lakes and into nature to be near trees. We went camping together and boating. He even tried riding bicycles with me. He didn't even practice in the backyard first. He came right out into the street on his first go-round. He loved puns and punny things. He was very clever. He taped a sticky note to a gift of a tape measure for me when I moved away from home. The sticky read, "No, you will always measure up." He was constantly writing things down on 3x5 note cards, and when he came to California to help me move into my place when I started law school, he wrote some sage advice for me on one. It read, "Go not where the path may lead, go instead where there is no path, and leave a trail." He borrowed that from Ralph Waldo Emerson. However, he did grant him credit on the 3x5 card. Many times during my struggles in living alone, working and going to school, wondering if I was going to make it, I would look at that card which we had taped next to my door so that I could see it as sort of a daily mantra each time I walked out of my apartment. I would read that card and feel filled with strength, and I knew that even if it had never been done the way I was about to do it, my dad said that my way was recommended, that I didn't have to go where others had gone before. I could make my own path, so onward I would forge. That note card has been next to every apartment door in every place I have ever lived since the day he gave it to me in 2005. It's a bit old and tattered and yellow now, but the advice is still just as strong. I am still filled with love and gratitude for my amazing father each and every time I read it, written in his own handwriting. He might have thought that he didn't measure up, but he made sure that I knew that I did. He made sure that I knew he was proud of me for everything and anything, and that I was loved and amazing for just being me. He didn't need to be there from the moment I was born, and he didn't need to provide the DNA. He provided every single thing that a parent, a father, should provide to a child. He gave me so much, and he never had to. We consciously chose to make our bond as father and daughter many years ago, and in so doing got to see and know the light in each other's hearts. We honored each other and brought joy, laughter, and love to each other's lives for 30 years. When he got prostate cancer, we got a book on it, and it said you have to talk to your family about it. You have to be willing to be there and be open. We sat down as a family and made the commitment to do just that, to share unabashedly. I know many people wonder why I still think of him as my dad. I had a dad already, and he and my mother eventually got divorced, but I've known Frank since I was 16 years old. He wasn't just some guy. He wasn't just my mother's husband. When he and I bonded, he became my dad forever and always. I was one lucky girl because I had two dads. My dads even got along, and they both knew that the other loved me and that I loved each and both of them. I know that we don't live forever, but more than anything, I wish that he was here with me now, standing beside me, telling me that everything will be okay, holding my hand and giving me a big hug, looking me in the eye and saying, "Do you know how much I love you?" Anyone who has ever looked into those big, bright blue eyes of his knows that he only loves one way, truly, deeply, and fully. I do not understand this whole plan for life and death, but I do know that kindness and unconditional love, like the love my dad gave, is rare. I gave him a plaque once, or maybe it was a shirt that said something like, "Any man can be a father, but it takes someone special to be a dad," and he most certainly is very special. To everyone who loved him and took time to be a part of his life, I feel personally very grateful. For all my father ever really wanted out of life was to be loved, and I know that he was. And that for him was a life well lived.